We live in a world that is obsessed with the big dreams, big successes, big transformations. We scroll through social media and see the highlight reels of people living what looks like a perfect, frictionless life. And because of this, we've developed a very human but very dangerous habit. We've started to believe that if we are struggling, even in small ways, something has gone wrong. We feel that if we are stuck in traffic, dealing with a difficult coworker, or feeling overlooked at home, we must be doing something wrong, or worse, that God has forgotten us. But if you open the Bible, you see a completely different story. The Bible is not a book about people living perfect lives. It is a book about people in pits, people in deserts, and people in the mundane, dusty corners of life. There is a concept in our faith called the theology of the cross. It suggests that God is often most present exactly where we least expect Him, in our weakness, in our failures, and in our annoyances. James chapter 1 tells us to consider it pure joy when we face trials. That sounds almost impossible, doesn't it? How can a bad day be a source of joy? It's because a frictionless life actually makes us spiritually weak. Think about a muscle. A muscle only grows when it meets resistance. In the same way, your soul only grows when it meets the resistance of a difficult day. The small things aren't distractions from your spiritual life. They are your spiritual life. Chapter 2, The Silent Years of Nazareth. The Hidden Life of Jesus. Let's look at the life of Jesus. We often talk about the 3 years of his public ministry, the walking on water, the healing of the blind, the feeding of the 5,000. Those were the big moments. But what about the 30 years before that? For 90% of his life on earth, Jesus was hidden. He lived in Nazareth, a town so small and unimportant that people used to say, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" He was a carpenter, or more accurately, a tekton, a builder who worked with his hands. Think about the human side of those 30 years. Jesus knew what it felt like to be physically exhausted. He knew what it felt like to have a customer who wouldn't pay on time. He knew the frustration of a tool breaking or the physical sting of a splinter. He lived a day-to-day human life. The sanctity of the ordinary. Why does this matter to you? It matters because it means that your ordinary, repetitive life is sacred. If the Son of God spent decades doing manual labor and living in a tiny town, then God is present in your laundry, in your spreadsheets, and in your morning commute. Jesus didn't just come to save us through the cross. He came to show us how to live a human life. He sanctified the small. When you are doing a job that no one notices, remember that for 30 years, the Savior of the world did exactly the same. He was faithful in the little, preparing for the much. Chapter 3, The Pinpricks of the Passion, Beyond the Nails. When we think of the suffering of Jesus, we immediately go to the crucifixion, and rightfully so. But if we look closer at the Bible, we see that the physical pain was only part of the story. The Passion of Christ was a series of small human betrayals. Think about the night in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus was in agony. He asked his 3 closest friends to stay awake and pray with him, just 1 hour, and they fell asleep. Have you ever felt that? That feeling when you're going through something hard and the people you love most just aren't there for you. That is a pinprick of the soul. Think about Peter. He didn't just walk away. He denied he even knew Jesus. He did it to stay safe, to stay comfortable. Think about the soldiers who mocked Jesus, putting a reed in his hand and a fake crown on his head. They were bullying him, sharing in his heart. When you are at work and someone makes a sarcastic comment about your faith, or when you feel invisible in your own family, you aren't just having a bad day. You are literally sharing in the emotional life of Jesus. In Isaiah 53, Jesus is described as a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. He isn't a distant judge watching you from a throne. He's a friend who says, "I know exactly how that sting feels. I've felt it too." Every time you handle a small hurt without becoming bitter, you are climbing Calvary with him. You are turning a human moment into a divine one. Chapter 4. The Termites of Character, the Small Scenes. Now, let's talk about our character. We all like to think that if a major crisis happened, we would be the hero. We think we'd be brave and faithful. But the Bible tells us that character isn't built in a crisis, it's only revealed in a crisis. Character is built in the small. In Matthew 25, the Master says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things, I will make thee ruler over many things." Notice he doesn't say, "Well done for the one big thing you did." He praises the few things. The danger in our human life isn't usually one giant explosive sin. It's what I call the termite problem. Termites don't knock a house down overnight. They just take one tiny bite at a time. A little bit of gossip at the lunch table, a small white lie to avoid trouble, a tiny bit of laziness in our work. These seem harmless. But they eat away at our integrity. If we can't handle a small annoyance with grace, or a small temptation with honesty, our foundation becomes hollow. Then, when a real storm hits, a tragedy, a loss, a major life change, we collapse, building the foundation. But the reverse is also true. Every time you do the small thing right, even when no one is watching, you are adding a steel beam to your soul. Every time you choose to be patient with a slow driver, or honest about a small mistake, you are building a life that cannot be shaken. You are becoming a person who is faithful in the little. Finally, we have to ask the big question, why? But he ended up in a pit with lions because he refused to stop praying. His co-workers who set him up were probably celebrating. Finally, we have to ask the big question, why? But he ended up in a pit with lions because he refused to stop praying. His co-workers who set him up were probably celebrating. But as the sermon we reflected on earlier reminded us, Daniel's response wasn't "Why me?" It was, "Lord, you remembered me." There is a biological truth that also works as a spiritual truth. The deeper the pit you are in, the easier it is to see the stars during the day. When everything is bright and successful and big, we get blinded by our own light. We think we are the ones in control. But it is in the pit, in the struggle, that we finally look up. We realize that God is the only one who truly knows the hunger of our hearts. Your 24-hour strategy. So how do we apply this to your human life starting tomorrow? First, acknowledge the sting. Don't pretend it doesn't hurt. Jesus wept at the grave of Lazarus. It is okay to feel the pain of a bad day. Second, redirect the energy. Instead of venting your frustration onto the people around you, offer it up. It sounds simple, but it's a spiritual weapon. Tell God, "This is my sacrifice today. I am giving this annoyance to you." Third, be the master of the small. Look for one tiny act of hidden kindness you can do today. Something that will never be posted on Instagram. Something that only you and God will know about. You aren't just surviving your life. You are being built into a masterpiece. God is not just in the miracles. He is in the splinters, the traffic, the repetitive chores, and the silent moments of your day. Take care of the small things today and trust that God has already taken care of the great things for you. May the peace that passes all understanding guard your hearts and your minds. Sign of the cross. God bless you.